Oh, okay, okay. You do that.
Were you doing introductions?
Apparently.
Okay.
You ready?
Oh, yeah. Born ready.
Born ready? She is. All right, everybody. So this afternoon we have 2 speakers lined out. The first up is going to be Miss Amanda Mueller. She's with the policy unit. And after that, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll have our final speaker on mental health. And then afterwards, open up for any questions or discussions. And then we'll try to get you guys out of here and headed home. So without further ado, Miss Amanda Mueller.
Hello. Okay, so this morning you guys heard from a representative. I did not see it. I got lost twice on the way here. Legitimately, one's trying to find a Starbucks, and the other because the GPS sent me to 1 Liberty Square, which is a much nicer building, in case you guys are looking for a place next year. Apparently it was the old MFA building. But anyway, so I'm going to go through a Cliff's Note on how a bill becomes a law, because it directly ties into my presentation I'm going to do on how laws become policy. So the first thing we're going to do is get a little nostalgic, and we're going to watch a video, which I had queued up, but I'm not ready.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
This is not very user-friendly, is it? And I also left my reading glasses in the car. Okay. It's playing the video in the background, guys. More political ads. That was paid. I was trying to sneak that in. Okay, so does anybody ever watch the whole process of how a bill becomes the law? Does anybody pay attention to that, what's going on in Jeff City during that season? Okay, you watch? I watch. It's a good time. Okay, so where it starts is filing and pre-filing. Pre-filing begins December 1 and it continues through the day before a session starts. So a bill can be filed or pre-filed. Pre-filed's obviously before the session starts. It's kind of like street cred within the House or the Senate to have the lowest number of their bill numbers. So they try to get them in as soon as possible because they are given numbers in the order they are filed. Pre-filed bills are automatically introduced day 1. And any senator or representative may introduce a bill until the 60th legislative day unless an extension is granted. And this year, we had a record number of bills filed. There was like 1,100. It was kind of wild. We didn't have to deal with that many in child support, but just throughout the whole thing, it was around 1,100 bills filed. And then there is the first and second read. So it's very ceremonial where they go in and they read the number, HB 4526, and then they say the name. They all have a nickname. And they say it during assembly the first time. And actually, this is wrong. It says a bill number is assigned when a bill is first read. And I watched a representative, and he told me, no, that's not right. They actually assign it whenever you file it. So that's wrong. After the first reading, it's placed on the calendar to be second read. It's very ceremonial. And then from that point in time, the House Speaker or the President Pro Tem assigns it to a committee. However, if you watch that video, obviously watched it, we were all here. But it talks about when a bill can die. Right here is where a bill can die because politics are going to go into play. So if the House Speaker or the President of the Senate doesn't like you, they don't have to place it on a committee calendar. So it could die right here. Once it goes to a committee, the assigned committee schedules a public hearing where the sponsor presents the bill and testimony is taken. So these are within the House, they're televised. I recommend just for entertainment value to watch a House committee session. They are, like I said, they're on their website, they're televised. They're not in session right now, but next year. But they are better than reality TV. They are very catty, they argue, they fight, they say all the things that probably we would keep in our own head. They say those things out loud to each other. So what they do is the person who sponsored the bill, they read it, and then people come in and either testify for or against it. And again, yes, ma'am? Do they read the whole thing?
I think they do.
Yeah, they read the whole thing. Yeah. Depends on the legislation. Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to actually rewind just a little bit because I talked about where bills can die. The head of that committee can just choose not to present it. So it could die right there. It could just stop. So it could be assigned to committee, and then the head of that committee could just not put it on their own calendar to discuss it, or they could run out of time. So it could die there. But then if it actually has a committee session, they're going to read it, and then they're going to be people usually who testify for it or against it, and they kind of alternate. And then they have discussions. They can report do pass with amendments or substitute bill, and then they can return with that recommendation or not report. So if they return with that recommendation, that's another place that a bill can die. Once it passes committee, it goes to the House floor for perfection. And I'm saying this House floor as if the bill starts in the House. A bill starts in the Senate, it goes to the Senate floor. And it can flip-flop. They're going to debate it in the originating chamber. So a House bill is going to be in the House floor, Senate is going to be on Senate floor. The House ones are televised, again, greater than reality TV. They get really catty towards each other and tell it how they really feel. And then if it's reported favorably, the bill moves to the perfection calendar and is debated on the floor. That's where they're getting catty. And then the amendments are debated on the floor, whether they want to keep those amendments or not. And then once it's perfected, it's reprinted. And then it's scheduled for third reading. Again, ceremonial. They don't really do anything. They just do a third read. And then they do a roll call vote following constitutional majority is required, which the House is 82, Senate is 18. If it's approved, it's sent to the other chamber for the same sequence. So whenever we saw the bill getting dragged into the other part, that's what happens. And it has to go through the entire process again. It's not easy being a bill, guys. So if the chambers differ So there was all these places where they could change it in the first chamber, and then it goes to it finally passes, and then it goes to the second chamber, and then they make all their changes. Well, they can't just pass them both, right? They have to reconcile. So there's reconciliation where they have to match up. They draft a compromise, and then both chambers must vote and approve that. And if that doesn't happen, then it dies again. And then if it's passed through both the House and the Senate, it is enrolled, typed in its final form, proofed and signed by the House Speaker and the Senate President. Members can file a formal ejection. You see that a lot whenever there's a political split, people don't agree with it. I think our attorneys can actually file formal objections, can we not? Yes. We have a new attorney, that would be Cyrus. And yeah, so if we have a law that passes and we don't think that it's gonna work, we can have a formal objection put in with that. And then it goes to the governor's desk where they have 45 days to sign it. It's very much like child support, that if nobody signs it, it will default. So he can't just ignore it. Well, he can't just ignore it, but it will default. Veto it with objections or sign the bill into law. And if it's vetoed, the legislature may override it with a 2/3 vote in both chambers. And then the effective date is 90 days after the session ends. Exceptions include appropriations and emergency acts. Do you guys know what appropriations are? It's the budget. So the reason it goes into effect sooner is because the end of the fiscal year is June 30th, and 90 days after the session ends is August 28th. So it has to go into effect sooner. And then the Secretary of State publishes the approved law, and it's incorporated into the revised statutes of Missouri. So have you guys seen the RSMOs and the policy manual? That's a law. So that is all I have on how a bill becomes law. So we're going to talk about what policy now does, which is much more exciting, except we don't televise our cat fights. I hit a wrong button. Okay. Any questions about that? Somebody say anything? No? Not yet? You'll have them? Okay. Well, and then it's funny because this is my actual presentation, so it's kind of gonna, start with, I'm gonna introduce you guys to policy and our unit. And also, I didn't say this earlier, I tend to talk really fast, and sometimes my brain moves faster than my mouth, so if that happens, just let me know. I'll try and slow down, and I'll slow down for a second, and then I'll speed up again. So, first I want to tell you about our team a little bit. So most of you guys know Sharon Schweitzer. She's been with the agency for about 15 years, 10 of it in policy. She's the Child Support Privacy Officer. She does the 4A, 4D, 4E interfaces. That's like the MPROG updates. You guys are about to get a memo. And then she does the Child Support Guidelines, which you guys should be very familiar with in Warrensburg. So the Form 14 and all that. We have Jacob. He does intergovernmental, and he does the fiscal notes, which you guys are going to learn a lot about in a few minutes. Kendra does enforcement. Ryan is new to our team, and she does financials. Stacy is in the Warrensburg office, and she does Patty Estimati in family violence. I have polled every office, and everybody says it's Patty, except for I haven't asked Warrensburg. Is it Pate or Patty? It's Patty. Patty. Anyway, but she does call it Pate, and we're all like, what are you talking about? So Patty Estimati, and then she does family violence and a couple other things, but I only had one line to put it. Jeannie is in the Warrensburg office. Yes. And she is actually starting a very exciting project where she's rewriting the policy manual. So we all know it's a mess. There were a lot of memorandums that came out over the years that said policy manual updates will be forthcoming, and they never forthcame. So she's doing a lot of research to find all those memos. There were a lot of emails that went out changing directives, no memos, so she's trying to compile all that information. I left for 3 years, so I don't have any of those emails. I joke that Sharon probably does, Jeannie probably does, but I do not. So there was also the question about, like, where's all this information? Can we compile it? So we are going to do a complete and total policy manual rewrite. We have a self-imposed deadline of 2 years, but we're kind of hoping for 1. Yay! Yeah, And it will be one of those situations where one day you'll have the policy manual and then the next day you'll have the new policy manual. We're not going to piece it out. We're going to just, but it'll be better, I promise, much more organized. Even simple things as much as like putting it in an order of operations. I don't understand why paternity's on the bottom and it's just out of order. So we're just gonna fix all that, I think, And she does forms as well. Carenza, she is CS Legal. She's somewhat of a paralegal, and she reports to me, but she mainly works with our attorney, who is over here, Cyrus. So, and he is new, if you haven't met him, and we're very excited. He came over from Jackson County, PA. And then we have Emma, who is administrative. She does all the things. She keeps me in line. She keeps the whole team in line. She does the memo feedback and all that. She does all sorts of things. She does your administrative, nope, that's not the right term, authorized representatives. So if you guys have a new authorized representative, she does that signature and gets it from the director. So that is policy. So what I want to talk about is where we fit into the legislative process. So after a bill is filed, PDU becomes involved when a fiscal note request is sent to FSD Child Support. So every single piece of legislation that is filed within the House or the Senate has to have a fiscal note. It's an official analysis explaining the the cost, saving, staffing needs, system impacts, and federal compliance issues related to proposed legislation. So what does that mean? I mean, just sometimes legislation can cost us money, and we need to figure out what it is, and we need to think about all the different ways it can cost us money, because there are a lot of different ways a bill can cost us money. A fiscal note is required for every bill. PDU does the fiscal note for every bill that impacts the child support program. If it impacts Section 452 and Section 454 of the Missouri Revised Statutes, and then if there are filed bills with CS program operational impacts. So a good example of that last one was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I don't remember how long ago it was. The treasurer was required to send us unclaimed property. That was a huge financial impact on our agency. We had to do system updates, we had to do programming, we had to work with other agencies. So even though it wasn't a child support bill, it was targeted towards the treasurer, it had a huge impact that we had to review and figure out what it was going to cost us. In order to prepare for fiscal notes, we have to update our contact list. One thing about fiscal notes is when they first start, we have 5 days. You have 5 days to respond. Here's new legislation review, this new law, this new proposed law, and you have 5 days to calculate how much it's going to cost us. But then towards the end of the session, they're like, okay, you have 2 hours to respond to us. And to be in that 2-hour time frame and to have the wrong contact is diabolical. It's a disaster. So we make sure everything is updated. And then in our situation this year, Joan, I don't know if you guys know Joan Kuhn, she did the fiscal notes for the last 10 years. She retired, and then Jacob and Jeannie started doing the fiscal notes. So it was all new contacts with us. So we had to be other people's contacts and have that updated as well. We had to collect key financial inputs. So do you guys know what that OCSE 157 is? It's that annual report that goes out to the feds and it calculates our incentive score because we have SOE, support order establishment, we have PEP, we have all the other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head. But we have all those and we have to rate a certain amount and then we have to pass the audit and then that calculates how much money we get from the feds. So right now it's like $59.6 million, I think, roughly, give a point. But we have to know that rate for every year because that's going to be how much of an impact some stuff would be that FMAP rate. TANF and 4D funding because we know that a lot of our activities impact the TANF block grant. And then mailing rates, which I'll tell you later why that's important. And then we confirm staff training and access to appropriate drives and data sources. So again, staff training because we had a new person doing fiscal notes after 10 years. Appropriate drives because in 2 hours, if they need some information and we don't have access to the right drive, we are scrambling. And Brandon will likely get it to us if you know Brandon who does security, but he's not happy with us. So we try to have all that stuff before, and he's not mean or anything like that. He's very nice about it. Receiving fiscal notes. So there's a system called MOLIS, and that's where they input all the fiscal notes. It's just kind of like they have their own version of Max. But I can't imagine it's as complex as Max, but it's MOLIS. And so the legislature puts everything in MOLIS, and then it goes to a DSS fiscal notes team, and then it comes down to an FSD fiscal notes team, and then it comes down to a child support fiscal notes team. So just like everything else, there's an umbrella, and it starts up here and it comes down to us. Fiscal notes are sent to PDU with the bill text, comparison to prior year's filings and previous responses. So we talked earlier about how much a bill can die. Well, they don't give up, right? They're just going to try again next year. So sometimes, and there's term limits, so you have 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate. So if they do the House and then they do the Senate, the same rep may submit it 16 times. My bad. I told y'all I get excited. So anyway, so we get all of that. So these emails have all this information attached. They've got the bill text, but we also have all these previous years, and we're going to compare them all. And you know, they have a mechanism, and by they, it's I didn't do nothing. Jeannie and Jacob, yeah, and that was fun. Also during fiscal note season, where I was sending everything to Joan, Jeannie, and Jacob. But yeah. But they do all this work, and they have a mechanism for taking the bill text from one year to the next and seeing what the differences are. Okay, so then we analyze a bill for impact. So we have to answer questions like, does the bill change our processes or legal requirements? Can you think of one that came through this year that does that? That didn't pass. There was one that, and I'm going to talk about it later, but there was one that was to change the age of majority to 22. That could have an impact. It would change our process because when do we mail the letter? Things like that. Is it mandatory versus optional? You guys have no idea the impact, the difference legislation can have if it says you may do something or if you shall do something, because if you may do something, you don't have to. And if you shall do something, you must. So if it says you may do something, we can look at, well, is it a best practice? Is it in our best interest? Things like that. Or does the department want us to do it? But we don't have to do it. As opposed to if we shall do something, we have to do something. And I'll show you guys an example later of how that can, listen, I threw the whole thing, like, yeah. So does it require new staff, system changes, or new workflows? I mean, sometimes if they send us something, I mean, it's going to require new staff if they're asking us to do something that increases your workload. And when I say new staff, I mean a FTE, not an actual, like, I can't do anything about the actual hiring process. But, you know, it's do we get a new FTE from fiscal? System changes, so like I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to go more in depth later, but like the 22, the age of 22, if that would have passed, that would have required a pretty big system change. Or new workflows, like sometimes we have to change direction. Whenever we did the 14L, that changed your guys' workflow. Whenever you do guidelines, you had to hit that button or you had to look at it to see if it qualified for low income. Does it affect collections, fees, federal match, or revenue? We had the most awful legislation come across where they wanted to require every child in Missouri to have a genetic test. Every child in Missouri to have a genetic test. It wasn't even affecting so much, the way they did it, they didn't think about how it would affect us. But the way it was written, it would have invalidated every single child support order made in the state of Missouri where a genetic test wasn't completed. Like, it was going to cost us $59 million because we would have been out of state plan, you know, federal non-compliance. It would have killed our support order establishment because we have to have at least 90% of our cases have to be in enforcement, basically is what that SOE says. And so all of these cases where we had a court order but no genetic test was completed, it was going to pop them back into paternity. And it would have killed our PEP as well. So, I mean, it would have absolutely destroyed us. We did put back that it was, you know, the fiscal impact was the $59 million federal incentive. And I don't know if they looked at our fiscal note, but it did die really early. She was a newbie. She was a new House rep. Sorry, get loud. She was a new House rep, yeah. And could it cause state plan non-compliance? I know I've brought up state plan a couple times. That is a very extensive document that we have to file with the feds. It's in the IRG. It's kind of a copy, paste, fill in the blanks kind of forms. It's like 50 pages. But then there's a whole lot of attachments. And there's like probably 200-300 pages of attachments. So it's just a state plan that we have to file every time we do something that updates it, such as new leadership, the Form 14 guidelines when they change. What else recently? The org chart had to change. So things like that, we have to update it. And the cost of non-compliance is our incentive score. So if we don't comply with it. So we have to look at that. So completing a fiscal note, we prepare a response, and again, by we, I mean Jacob and Jeannie. They prepare a response section by section. So if you look at a revised statutes, it's like 452.340. That 340 is the section. So depending on how much we have to provide a response for each section, even if it's no impact. We have to ensure consistency with previous years unless the change is justified. So we can't just say 1 year it's going to cost us $10 million and the next year it's going to cost us 12. We can't say that. We have to justify it. We had one this year that the justification was that we had new leadership and the leadership would have taken a different direction. So, but we do have to justify if we change it from year to year. And then we have to include the fiscal, operational, and federal compliance impacts. So like there was one where the impact was, it was 1 FTE. There was one where it was $40,000 in postage. Like it's just depending on what the note is, but we have to calculate and talk about what the impact is. We work with our partners. So we collaborate with ITSD for programming cost estimates. It's very nice that all we have to do is that we defer to OA ITSD for programming cost. However, recently with the passing of the budget, our IT was pulled back into DSS, so I'm hoping we can still say we defer to DSS ITSD instead for programming costs, but we'll see how that plays out next year. DLS Legal Counsel for legal interpretations or hearing impacts. So last year our attorney was Travis Miller. We had to work with him quite a bit. Next year's going to be Cyrus. So yeah, he will tell us, what we must do. And there was one where we met with the attorney and we reviewed it together and they told us what we had to do versus what we may do and what that would look like. So a lot of times we do have to have legal counsel review a lot of these to see what we have to do. Budget staff for cost allocations. So as you know, we don't deal with real money over here in child support. We deal with fake money. So there's a budget staff that we're going to ask to get a lot of the cost of things, and they're going to tell us how that's going to be paid. And then other divisions as needed. Like I said earlier, we had the Department of, why do I keep saying department? It was the Treasurer's Office. And so they would have given their information as to how much it cost. And then review and approval. So it's drafted, the CS response is drafted, and then it's given to me for review and approval. Then it goes to Carrie. She has to review it, and then she sends it to the FSD fiscal team, who sends it to the DSS fiscal note team, who puts it back in MOLIS. They don't have to keep our response. We would like them to, but they don't have to. We've wrote a fiscal note response, it's been approved, and at some point in time they pulled it out and it didn't make the final draft. And throughout the session, we track updated versions, omnibus bills, confidential drafts, and legislative hearings. So, like I said earlier, there's all these points in time where they can change the bills. We have to write a new fiscal note each time if it's a change that would impact us. So we could have a fiscal note that has multiple different versions of it. Omnibus bills, does anybody know what an omnibus bill is? You guys should know, you've been here. Last time I told them they couldn't answer. So an omnibus bill is where I've talked about all these bills can die through various points. An omnibus bill is one where a bill is gaining traction and they believe it's going to pass and they use politics to add their bill to another bill as an amendment. And then if it gets passed with that, it obviously alters the financial impact. So it can go one of two ways where we can have our bill that we actually have that we're tracking and it can have some unrelated legislation add to it which may have no change, or exactly the opposite, some bill we have no idea about and our language was added to it. And we just have to track those and make sure that they don't have an impact. Confidential drafts, I don't really understand what those are to some extent other than they come over and there's no record and we answer them. They're so confidential we have no idea what they actually are, right? And then legislative hearings, we watch all the hearings. I've told you, they have the House ones, they're an excellent watch. I literally have them running on my computer while I'm working because they're really interesting. And then we continue revising fiscal notes as the bills evolve. And then after the session ends, we review the truly agreed and finally passed bills. We had one this year that was truly agreed and finally passed, and it was an omnibus bill that had legislation popped in there that we had no idea about. We had to meet with legal, who, I think we met with Kelly because they were in between attorneys. And we were in the clear, but it was one of those where it was kind of a shock. It was a new situation. But once it was truly agreed, finally passed, it got sent to us and said, hey, this may impact you. We confirmed no last minute amendments, altered something we previously responded to, because again, they like to change it, they like to fix it, they like to do little bits to it that could impact us. And then there is a legislative implementation summary response that we have to send up to the department, and they send it to the legislature to tell them how we're going to implement it and what the impacts could be. And then we begin implementation readiness. So we talked about the timeframes. Once it's signed, it's 90 days after session. We're not waiting until 90 days because, I mean, that's just not a good idea. So we're starting, but then it could get vetoed or something could happen. There are a lot of things that we prep and we get ready and then they just die. And that's okay. We'd rather be overprepared than underprepared. So how do we turn legislation into policy? And I'm going to give you a disclaimer here. This is not just legislation. This is Fed regs. This is Supreme Court decisions. These are all of these different things are how we turn just what we receive into policy. So there is a hierarchy of legal authority. So as a department, we're governed by the following: the federal case law, so U.S. Supreme Court, federal constitution and law, federal rules, federal policy, state case law, state constitution and statutes, and then state regs. So as you can read through that, the laws that are passed in Missouri are second from the bottom. So we have a lot of things to look at before we actually put it into place, and then to see if there's any contradictions, which we try to put that information in the fiscal note, but I'm not even guaranteed that they're reading the fiscal notes. So we have to look at all of that before we implement anything. And then agency policy is not law. That's why it's not included in the hierarchy. I think a lot of people think that policy is the law. It is not. It is just a compilation of all the different laws into a policy that is easily usable by you guys. So a little bit, more user-friendly than, I just want you all to know, I went over to Doler and I supported work comp for 3 years in their IT department, and they literally just had their regs and their revised statutes printed out, and there was no policy manual. Like, where's your policy manual? And they're like, we don't have one. And I'm like, well, we have like a 1,700-page policy manual over child support. I don't understand how you guys know you're doing. And they're like, we really don't. They just do whatever. So, but I don't think they had like as much policy as we have. They're a little bit unregulated. They don't have the audits we do. But it was definitely something completely different. Our policy is something that our agency has compiled so that you guys can use it, because there is a ridiculous amount of Fed and state level regulations and laws and case law that impact everything we do. So, agency interpretation and scope. So we review the revised statutes and its legislative history to assess the intent, scope, and delegated authority. So this one I have printed up here is just the header of the revised statute. But if you look down below, that's how many times the law has changed. So that is the same revised statute that they have changed over the years. This is actually the one touching on age of majority. So while it hasn't changed in 10 years, it's changed a lot before that. And a lot of times it was like, whenever the political parties would flip-flop. They would write it in, they would write it out, they would write it in, they would write it out. So we're going to take a look at the historical, what it's done within that law. Getting hot. And I don't usually get hot, guys. So our role is we identify the actions required for our agency to comply with the new law, because sometimes it's a lot and sometimes it's a little. So, and like I said, it's not just laws, but I'm going to use the passports You guys saw the passport revocation memo, I hope. And so that came to us and they were like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. Actually, I'm gonna rewind that. We didn't know. We saw it on the news. Like, nobody sent us anything. But then we did a little bit more research and there was nothing for us to do to have to comply with it. We were already doing everything we had to do. However, to prevent confusion, we updated the manual and sent out a memo. But there was nothing we had to do to comply. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to determine any deadlines or required implementation timeframes. So when I talked about the Form 14L, and the reason I keep going back to that one is because I worked on that project from the systems side, so I'm very familiar with that one. It went into effect out of timeframes. So the day we got it, the day they signed the paper, we were out of timeframes and we were out of compliance. So we sent out a memo and we're like, hey, you're gonna have to do a workaround. You're gonna have to generate 2 Form 14s and this is how you're gonna have to do it. And then we did a phase 1 where we fixed the system as fast as possible so it generated that form, and then we did a phase 3 so that it would fix everything that went wrong in the rush for phase 2. That was one where a lot of the actions that we took were based on the fact it was already out of time frames. So, but then we have the National Medical Support Notice. I don't know if you guys know, but the OMB number on the corner is expired. That's just data collection, just so you guys know, but the number on it is expired. But they've extended it through the end of the year. So, and as we all know, Systems is very, very busy putting a facelift on Max and moving it into the web. So they don't have a lot of time to be changing a date on the bottom corner of a form that isn't actually out of time frames. So those are the things that we have to think about whenever we're determining what we're doing. Another good example, Department of Corrections. Did you guys love that memo I sent out? And then I sent out a correction. And we were notified on Thursday that on Monday they were going to stop taking the mail. So that was kind of a decision made, and then the system kind of went, no thank you, we don't like this. So we had to backtrack all the changes and then recoup. But that was another decision we made based on the fact we just didn't have any time. So we're going to assess whether updates or modifications to existing systems are necessary. So the passport thing, we didn't have to change anything. But the Form 14L, we had to build a whole new screen. So it just depends on what it takes to accomplish what we're doing. Review and revise policy manuals as needed. So that's what I've talked about. They sent out the memo and said they would update the policy manual. And sometimes it got done and sometimes it didn't. From here on out, it will be updated every time. But we have to review to see what needs to change in the policy manual to match the new law or other thing that changed our system, I guess. Draft a review and revise forms as needed. So, you know, I just said earlier the National Medical Support Notice was changed. The IWO has a proposed change right now to add some additional boxes on it. So sometimes we draft and revise forms because we have to, but sometimes we do it because it's a business need. Is there anything? What are you working on?
57.
What's that?
That's the arrears calculation sheet.
Oh, yeah, the arrears calculations. So the 57, we had a request to change that. And we're just revising it as needed. So that one wasn't a policy change, it was a business need. We provide information and support to the training unit for staff education. So we send out the memo to you guys today as current staff, but new staff coming in, they need that information. Or it could be something just so massive that the training unit decides that they need to do some sort of, you know, division-wide or agency-wide training. So it's kind of at their discretion. That's their area of expertise, but we would provide them with the information and they would make the decision on how it's best to get it to staff ongoing. And then we prepare and distribute memorandums or communications to staff. So yeah, the memos are written by policy and then we send those out. Even if they're not our memos, except for the PA ones, we draft them all, but if somebody else needs a memo, it's, hey, Amanda, we need a memo, and then we draft those, and then work with the other people to get those accurate. I don't know why I did that. How long do I got? I think this is kind of just more the same, so I'm going to go on to the next one. So we're going to go through a scenario. The age of majority is increased to 22. Again, this did not pass. This is just a, let's talk about how PDU would handle this if it did pass. So we're going to review historical policy materials. We can't just copy and paste them in there because there's been a lot of other changes to that section since the 10 years or 12 years. Actually, I think it was 07 the last time it was 22. Maybe it was 06. But we're going to review them and see what they said about the scenario to see if we can, reuse some of that information. And we're going to evaluate what changes need to occur. So if we think about max, what changes would need to occur to up the age to 22? What was that? Yeah, the forms manual, yeah. But in max, no, it should still go out because the 18 is still when that would go out. Yeah, it would be the date it ends Sobel. The automatic emancipation at age 21 would need to be up to age 22. I know that I came up with a couple others last time, but I can't think of them offhand. DEPPD? Yeah, does it say like 21? Yeah, so it would need that text change. So yeah, we would have to make a couple changes. It wouldn't be too bad. This is actually not, this is one of those, personal feelings aside, don't think it would have been that bad. We're going to coordinate with systems to update max. So PDU obviously doesn't update the system, so we're going to have to let them know what we need it by, and let them determine how it's best to do it in the system. And they probably do the same thing. They look at how it was coded previously. We're going to identify affected cases and prepare a one-time notice. That's what we were talking about the postage before. It was like $7 a letter we were going to have to mail out. It was going to be $43,000 in postage, give or take. We would have to send out a letter to everybody who's affected, because do you know how many mad people would have had if their child was about to turn 21 and they were going to have to pay till 22. So we'd have to let them know, because that's the right thing to do, right? Policy manual revisions. So it probably would be something fairly simple as to just finding all of the 21s and changing them to 22s, but there would be policy manual revisions. Develop staff communication. That's the memo. We would probably, in this situation like this, include in the communication, FAQs and what questions we can answer, because we're trying to do, I don't know if you guys saw in the passport memo, how we attached a document with frequently asked questions so that you guys would have a little bit more direction whenever you're talking on the phone with parties on questions about situations like this. So we would develop the memo and probably an FAQ. Internal reviews and approvals. So policy manual changes only have to go up to Carrie, only. But then memos have to be signed by Mandy, the FSD director. Again, collaborate with the training unit. They're going to have to update all of their training materials to tell people that everybody emancipates at 22, not 21. And then post-implementation monitoring. I don't know if you guys know this, but every time we pop something out, we send, hey, there's this system change. We're sitting there, we're tracking it. If we're updating a form, we're in OnBase, searching those forms as they're generating so we can look and see if they're working right. We've got IT looking at cases to see if they're working the way that they're supposed to work. So there is a lot of behind-the-scenes monitoring to see if it works. And then the best tool that we have is you guys out in the field saying, hey, this didn't work. That was how we found out about the DOC thing. Something happened, and somebody emailed me, and I sent it over to systems. So, yep. Okay, so any questions about moving the age up to 22, how we would do that? So I have one more very fun piece of legislation to go over with you guys. I put a roller coaster on here because it is an absolute roller coaster of a ride from a PDU standpoint. I feel like you guys don't find this stuff as exciting as I do. Rachel calls me a nerd all the time. Happy about it. Okay, so let's go on a roller coaster ride through this legislation. Listen, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus. I tell myself all the time. I did this, and it was let's go on a field trip, and it was car. And I don't know if you guys know about Bentley and Mason's Law, but it's a law written in response to a car accident. And I was like, oh, that was a little insensitive. So yeah, we're on a roller coaster ride now, not in a car ride. Okay, so this one is, because it passed Senate Bill 1135, and it's to amend Chapter 454. And I said that at the beginning, that if it's in 454 or 452, it impacts us, we got to get involved. That's our sections. They should stay out of them, but that's just my opinion. So this is, a section shall be known and may be cited as Bentley and Mason's Law. That's what I told you earlier, that has a bill number. It was SB 1135 or 55, I already forgot. And then it has a name, so it's Bentley and Mason's Law. And so it basically says if a person has been convicted of, pled guilty to, or entered a plea of whatever that is, to an offense under somebody else's sections, such offenses cause the death of a parent or parents of a child or children, and a surviving parent or guardian files a petition to receive child maintenance from the person, such person shall be ordered by the court to pay child maintenance on the child or children until, and then they copied and pasted our emancipation statutes, termination of support. Vicky's not here to yell at me, but yeah. Section 577, all that stuff, that is regarding drunk driving. So essentially, and you guys may have seen this in the news, but if you are driving drunk, you're found guilty under these particular sections, and if you kill a parent, you have to pay child maintenance. So, does anybody know what the major issue is here with this? What you think? We don't, so that one's not a problem. I'll get to that section. But there is something here that is a big problem with our agency. And I'm not going to give y'all too much time because I don't want you to sit here in silent. What?
Who opens a child support?
That is not the issue at hand. The issue is that the federal government defines child support as parent paid by a parent. And there is no parent paying support here. It is a person convicted of a crime. This would put us in state plan noncompliance. We cannot enforce this case with 4D funds. We cannot enforce this case with 4D funds. And we are all paid with 4D funds. So if anybody's going to work on this, they're going to have to timesheet it and get billed to general revenue. So there's that. That's the first problem. So yeah, it's the child maintenance. They do call it child maintenance at least. They don't call it child support. But then the news reported it as child support, so I'm sure that caused a lot of confusion. Okay, so who's the trustee? The court shall order the child maintenance payments to be made to the circuit clerk as trustee. So we're good, right? We're on the top of this roller coaster. We're good. We don't have to touch it. But then it adds this. As an alternative to subdivision 1, the court may, upon its own motion, order that maintenance payments be made to the Family Support Payment Center, which is 4D funded. So we can't do that. So we're like, oh, bottom of the roller coaster. I'm like, oh no, this is not good. But then if you read a little bit further, it says that we can say no. So the court shall not order payments to be made to the payment center if the Family Support Division notifies the court that such payments shall not be made on the case to the center. So we can say no. So we went back up, right? But then we have this. In addition to any other remedy provided by law for the enforcement of child maintenance, if a maintenance order has been entered, the director of the Family Support Division or the director's designee shall issue an order directing any employer or other payer of the person required to pay child maintenance under this section to withhold and pay over. And I talked about something very important earlier in language, because it says we shall. So what this does is it says that we have to issue income withholding orders if asked. If asked. So this has been reviewed by, not Cyrus, the previous attorney. And essentially our plan at this point in time is to just hope nobody ever calls us and asks us to issue an income withholding order. And if they do, we will then scramble, write a policy, make an income withholding order, and issue it, and do a timesheet, and bill it to general revenue. We also have, through these town halls, discussing it, decided we're probably going to send out some sort of memo or communication to staff, because I feel like, I don't actually think it's going to be as big of an issue as we've made it out to be, because, of course, I looked up and there's 157 fatalities per year in Missouri. That was the average, I think, from drunk driving. That's not parents, that's not anything like that. That's just a total of 157. So worst case scenario, there'd be 157 cases a year. And then of those, how many would actually come to us? But I also wonder how many phone calls you guys are going to have to field. So we're talking about sending out some communication, and then again, that FAQ as to what you guys can answer if you receive any phone calls about this issue, because the basic answer is the court's the trustee, call the court. And then if the court wants us to issue the income withholding order, the circuit clerk's going to have to call me. And then I'm going to have to assign it to one of my staff to get it up and ready. And I don't feel like they're going to do that. If they have to keep the trustee record, why would they call us and tell us to write out an income withholding order when they could just issue their own? But again, it's if they call us, we have to do it. We don't have an option to say no. We can try to convince them not to, but yes.
So I haven't really used it, but my understanding is I'm supposed to use, if guardian petitions in court for the child maintenance, they're supposed to follow guidelines. Presumably, the person convicted of the crime is in jail and has no income. I'm wondering how many child maintenance orders will actually be entered by the court, even though we will have some children for the benefit.
You know, I thought about it because I have a lot of opinions. It shouldn't really impact us, but I wonder if they're going to do it like foster care cases or something like that, where they don't even use the convicted person's income, where they would just use the parents and then say they have to pay that. But they do tell them to use the Form 14, and it is specifically written for parents. So I don't even know if they would use the person ordered to pay's income. I don't know. Because I've looked over that a couple times, but that's not my area of expertise, obviously. I'm not an attorney. But I think the way that the Form 14 is written and the rules surrounding it, that they would have to do it like we do foster care, which we don't do anymore really, but it's you do two, right? Wrong person. Are there any? Yeah, they do one where they do mom versus, where mom pays, and one where dad paid, and then it's two Form 14s, and then they both have to pay their side. That's what I would think they would do. Because then it's also, if one parent, then how do they have income if they're not there anymore?
Right.
So is it like potential, again,
Well, if you don't have income, you're minimum wage.
what was that?
There's so many issues with the application of how you're going to calculate support. I think we're going to have so much court litigation and appeals to determine how this is even applied here, years off from having to do anything.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we can just, that's in the courts. I mean, not to say anything about you guys. It's not my problem. It's not policy's problem.
Maintenance, not child support. That's not
Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna handle it, and, because she had said if they don't have any income, you're gonna impute, but at the same time, obviously they're not gonna have income, they're deceased. So I don't know how, and I feel like it was so funny, because I talked to Kelly about it, Kelly Kramer, and she's like, well, how did all these other states write it? And they didn't include any reference to the child support. They didn't include the calculations. They just basically said, they wrote them a lot better than us, not gonna lie. And that it has a lot of ambiguity, so I don't think it'd have as much room to fight it like we do. But that's gonna be handled by the courts, so. It'll be interesting to see what happens to it. I'm just hoping nobody ever calls us and asks us to issue an income withholding order. That's my plan. And if it does, we'll just scramble, and like I said, we'll have to timesheet it and write a policy.
And if you think about it, if it really is that serious a crime, your odds of them not going to jail for a little while is going to be there, and they release it
So the way it's written, it says that support is ordered upon petition of the parent or guardian, the surviving parent or guardian. And I didn't include it because it wasn't relevant to us, but it does say that payments are to start like a certain amount of time upon release. And they are to pay current support if it's still due and all arrears. So, and I don't know the way they wrote it, again, not my area of expertise, if our presumed paid statute applies to it. I'm unsure, so if payments don't start until after release, then I would assume even with if our presumed paid statute applied to it, then that would be the first payment. So it would be 10 years after release. I don't know, I'm splitting hairs. So, yeah.
I don't work for FSD, I'm a court clerk that does child support. So if somebody calls me and says, how do I go about getting this money? Do they have to go through an attorney to have something filed with the court? Is there going to be forms that they can fill out on the Missouri Court's website like they do for other things?
I would think so. I would think that I'm assuming that they have their own department like me, where they prepare for things like this. So,
I'm talking about an individual who calls me and says, okay, my husband was killed in this car wreck, this guy needs to be paying me child maintenance. How do I get that started?
I'm assuming, that's what I was saying, I'm assuming the OSCA has their own department like me that is preparing forms, preparing policy, preparing all the things that they need.
Through the courts, it would mean that they need to go get a lawyer or be pro se and file a petition with the court. There isn't going to be a form that's going to be filed in a lawsuit.
Okay, that was my question. Is it going to be a lawsuit? Is it going to be an automatic thing where they should just file a piece of paper?
Go back to it.
File a petition with the court requesting this relief. So that guardian or parent is going to have to file something with the court asking the court to order this.
So all we
Just
want
like
to
the
do
attorney
is
action.
talk to an attorney.
Just like
Yeah.
the attorney action is one of the options for us to do it, so that they have to do it.
Yeah, it says, like, that's pretty much the extent of, where does it say it? I just thought, files a petition to receive child maintenance from the person. So I would assume it'd be similar to child support forms, but
I just have another idea back on the IWOs. Since
Yes.
federal regs, which is federal law, says that we can't perform any non-authority activities, and Max is funded with those funds. We could just challenge it at that portion.
you can't put it in max. You cannot put it in max, just for the simple term, like, you cannot put a non-custodial parent that's not a parent.
We could attempt to challenge that part of the statute is void because it's federal law and have to strike it.
Well, and that's what I'm saying about the fact that I don't see why they would do it to us, because we wouldn't have it in max. The clerk would be the trustee, and we would have to be like, okay, what's his name? I mean, we would have to handwrite it out.
Right.
And then we'd have to say, how much do they owe, and what's their address, and what's the employer, and then on the back of it would say, send the payments to the circuit clerk. So it's not going to exist, even if we get a request to issue an income withholding order, we're not putting it in max. My biggest concern outside of all that is circuit clerks putting it into max. I mean, it shouldn't allow them to, because again, you can't put a non-custodial parent that is not a mother or father. Like, the system will not allow it. But if they, how many times have we been in max and been like, it won't let me do it, and then you just you figure it out. You do a workaround, and it's wrong, but you do it. I worry that that's going to happen.
A lot of times, max receipt order status holder is not for the kind of same thing.
It should not be in max. If it's opened in max, we would probably, it depends on how fast it has, we'd have to get maybe IT involved to get it scrubbed. But it should not go in max. Max is paid for with 4D funds, and no 4D funds can go towards this at all. So, I didn't.
Oh, that creates a burden on the trustee also to create accurate accounting of those records and payments received and what's owed. And they would have to handle it, because that wouldn't be a regular payment records process. It would be outside of it.
Yeah, they can't, I was like, maybe they'll have an Excel spreadsheet, I don't know. Like, I don't know, but they can't put it in max. I don't know how, and I don't know, I mean, I'm sure that the circuit clerk is a trustee for a lot of payments outside child support. How do they deal with those? I just don't know anything about their processes, but I mean, I'm sure people get sued all the time and owe stuff. Does the court track that? No? Just garnishments?
Yeah.
So I would think it would kind of,
Garnishments are paid to the attorney, not to the court. Most of the time. So, you know,
well, if you're in the child support section, it shouldn't be you. No, just I don't know how they're gonna handle it. Yeah, I maybe, no, I don't know. I would assume, again, they'd have to use some sort of Excel spreadsheet or something like that, but we cannot pay for it. We cannot do it with our funds because it would put us in state plan non-compliance, which is that $59 million, which we, as we saw the budget, we cannot afford to lose. So, yeah, I'm not willing to mess with that. Yes, ma'am?
So if you get a call in our office, somebody explains the situation, what is our first step? Like as a staff member, what should they do? What's the next step? You get a call, hey, this is my problem, because I get it all the time. You know, what's my next step? Where do we direct them, or what action should we take?
That is, I'm not, because whatever decision is made, it has to be approved by Carrie before I say it. I can give you some of my ideas, which would essentially be, unfortunately, that is not a child support function. It is not child support. You're going to have to contact the county in which you reside.
Okay.
It'll probably be something like that. But, and we, of course, would include some more clarifying verbiage and some explanations and everything else like that. But we're going to deflect. We're going to send it over to somebody else because we literally even, I'm splitting hairs, but should we be wasting 40 funds on the phone to answer questions about something we're not allowed to use 40 funds on? We answer questions we don't have to all the time. What would you do if somebody called you and they wanted to know about their work comp claim? I'm not work comp, I don't know the answer to that. And obviously don't be that rude. But, you would say, this is not, you have the wrong number and I don't know where to send you. And that, that is, I don't work the phones, I don't deal, that's a Rachel script thing as to what you would do if you got a wrong number. But it would be essentially the same process, is that, it's not something that we do. It's not child support, it's not something we can enforce. You probably need to contact an attorney. But I will, again, when we send out the memo, we'll have clarifying language and what direction we want to take.
Would that be something to add to the verbiage on the child support website? Which I know this is going to be once in a blue moon thing, if anything, but they come to our website and they're like, oh, I want to fill out an app, and then try it that way.
So, I can't remember the exact language, but we recently looked up, and it was we're federally mandated to open an application, but it had some verbiage it's not the right word, but it was a good application. It was an accurate application. So if you send us a child support application and it says non-custodial parent and you put a non-parent, it's not a good application. So we wouldn't open that. I also feel like a lot of times it's, don't confuse people too much. They already don't understand what we do. And so, and I will throw this out there, if you go to the child support website, it's an IM website and we have a few honorable mentions. I don't know how much we want to put on there. And I just don't know how much we'd want to put on there to confuse people. So I don't know. Again, that would be at a higher level than me. Sorry. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think that would be a direction we take, but I'll think about it, so.
Well, yeah, because I know we see applications a lot, where, from one of us, intake will just be oh, they put their name, and shoot it out there, and it's that's either not the right person, or there's no relation, so then we have to piece together and figure out, but that's one of the cases where they sign, so.
Yeah.
Just a question.
I'm working with them on that already.
Oh, yeah.
They have this law that they are not opening any case.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because I think there was this idea that we had to open every single application received. But that language is in there, I cannot remember the word, but it had to be a good application, like it has a word before you say it. And that is in my list of things to send over to Cyrus to review. I didn't want to send him 500 things on his first day, so I'm like, shooting a couple out. Yeah, piecing them out so he doesn't run. Because I think that needs, from what I understand, from what, me and the couple people who've reviewed it within policy, we think that needs to change anyway, so that's just in the works. But using that language, we also think it'll be the same issue. If we receive applications on this legislation, we can just say, it's not a good application. We don't have to open it. So.
Right, and I'm just curious, if they don't open with the applicants about it, applicants looking at these and something else to the person and
If
say,
they can't open an application, they do get open.
Oh.
There's very few applications that they do not process, like I for children,
yeah.
children that can't get it because they don't, the English mother is not going to be or you can't find them. So very seldom do they have an application that they do not open.
That's all I got. So, yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much.
Taking time out of your day.
Yes, I got me out of the office.
We're gonna break for about 15 minutes, and then our next speaker should be here to finish out our day. So if you want to take a break, and then we'll come back.
I like to be surprised. So.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for your patience. We have our next presenter here, Greg Bookman, and I want you guys to give him a warm welcome.
Well, thank you all for having me today. Like I was introduced, so my name is Gage Brookman, and when they asked me to present today, the topic was mental health, and I wanted to focus a little bit on workplace culture and kind of embed those two things in there. I am curious though, because you've got kind of a diverse audience here, like what are your different roles? What are the things that, what does your day-to-day look like? Is everyone's pretty different, or? Okay, so what are some of those daily tasks, those roles and responsibilities for you all?
Get your numbers.
Get your numbers? Okay, what are the numbers? What's that quota about? Sorry, you're getting put on the spot now, you guys. Okay. Mm-hmm. We also have child support enforcement within our office. Mm-hmm. So we do everything from maternity establishment to enforcement to court actions. Okay, so a lot of high stress roles too, huh? Okay. Well, hopefully some of this stuff applies. I like to have like really interactive kind of yeah.
So I can just tell you what my day is like.
Sure.
So since I'm on the call center with doing financials, also getting tasked with the supervisor and other outside places. So sometimes when I get a call, I have to switch gears and go straight into that, and so I do have to kind of switch gears sometimes and then go back to what I started.
Uh-huh. A lot of the task switching. Yeah, I get that question a lot as a therapist. What's that?
And they can't make any mistakes either.
Oh yeah, not a lot, right? Yeah. No, I get that a lot as a therapist too, right? I have people ask me all the time, like, how do you go from one session where maybe, an individual's in crisis and then all of a sudden you have a kid walk in and that's your next session, and trying to switch gears really simultaneously or pretty quickly as the day moves about. So hopefully some of this will apply to you all. I like to have that information because it also helps me kind of tailor as I talk what some of the things I talk about are. That's kicked out. Yeah. Just need to hit space. Hey, there we go. Okay, so let me tell you all a little bit more about myself before I get into this. So, like I said, my name is Gage Brookman, and I do want to thank you all for being here today. I appreciate this opportunity. I do a lot of speaking on mental health. It's something that I'm passionate about. I actually just hit 9 years last Thursday. I started in the field on my 21st birthday. I got a job as a case manager working community mental health, and they only did orientation once a month, and it started on my 21st birthday. So they're like, actually, can you move up here and start like a week from now? I was like, sure, okay. So all I ask is that as I move throughout the course of this presentation, that you all keep an open mind, but also use what applies and discard what doesn't, right? So like some of the things I might talk about today might resonate with you, and some of them might not, but it might resonate with somebody else. So if anyone has questions as we move about, feel free to raise your hand or throw them out there, and I'll do my best. So in that background a little bit, so I started off as case manager for community mental health. That was down in Lawrence, Kansas, and then moved and I did private practice for a while. I was a registered behavior technician, so I worked with kids with autism and ADHD. After I finished grad school, I went to a crisis team for about 2.5 years, and so like that 988 number, we had a mobile response team that would respond to those calls in the field, go to people's houses, residents, wherever they were at. And then now I work with Country Crossroads Counseling, so I work with kids, adults, veterans. I'm kind of all over the place. Like if you ask my day-to-day, it's different every single day, which I love. So yeah. So everyone brings a different story into the room, right? The things that I might be going through right now might be very different than the things that somebody else is going through. Our life experiences shape our understanding of our mental health. And so one of the things I want to keep in mind as I move through this is that some of the things that we might talk about or that different people might bring up might have varying impacts on different people. So if you do want to take a minute or need some space, feel free to step out, and we'll try to move through. So how many of you, just as a kind of general question here, have had a day where you have a full day's worth of work, right? You might not have been physically active, but you still leave the office and you're like, I'm exhausted, I have nothing left to give. Yeah, that's me all the time too. Like I feel this ebb and flow, right? It's like one day I'm like, okay, I'm actually feeling pretty good. And then the next day I'm like, I have nothing left. I get off work and I'm like, I don't even want to talk to people, you know, I'm like, I need to be left alone for a little bit. But a lot of times what people don't realize is that being mentally exhausted is just as impactful as being physically exhausted. So I spent about 12 years of my life doing speech and debate, all through high school, college. I coached high school and college. And there were days where we would have tournaments where it would be 8-10 rounds back to back. You know, you'd get there at 7 in the morning, you wouldn't walk out until 9 o'clock at night. I can't think of any physical activity that I've ever done that made me even anywhere near as close to being as tired as those days did. And sometimes being a therapist too, right? You all work in a lot of high stress jobs where maybe you have a lot of roles and responsibilities, you wear a lot of different hats. And in our roles, because we work with people a lot of times, there's a secondary kind of effect that has on us, right? It's not just the things that are going on in my life, but I'm also carrying things that are going on in other people's lives. Or when other people become overwhelmed, maybe that's now something I have to navigate with them, right? And so a lot of times in these situations, we help people and we encounter different conflicts, emotional distress, trauma histories that might kind of overlap with our own. So even the folks of us who are the most dedicated, right? We never make mistakes, we always show up on time, we're still prone to burnout, compassion fatigue, and those are two of the topics that I want to address today. So burnout, who's familiar with burnout symptoms? Anyone know what burnout looks like? Yeah? Yeah. How do you notice it when you're feeling burned out? Anyone care to throw anything out there?
I don't care anymore.
Yeah, so the numbness, right? The emotional numbness. We get burned out, and it's like, even if you know the things to say, you know the motions to go through, but we're kind of checked out in the background, right? Yeah, what else? Anxiety. Yep, that comes up a lot, especially if we are high performers too, because then we might guilt ourselves in thinking, I should be showing up in a better way than I am right now, right? So yeah, a lot of times that feeling emotionally drained, right? I have nothing left to give, or maybe I'm still doing all the things, but it just doesn't feel the same, right? So I feel like I'm ineffective even though I'm doing all the stuff. Productivity can sometimes come up there. Depending on the ways that we cope, that can also impact us too. And cynicism. This is where I'll start to notice sometimes with myself. I'll like drive to work in the mornings and I like catch myself in the rearview mirror and I'm like, oh, I look so serious right now, you know, because I'm just like grumpy on my way to work or something. And so there's this kind of skill that I want to talk about at the end of this presentation that I think works for that symptom of burnout. But yeah, it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged workplace stress, right? Workplace isn't the only place we can become burned out, but it's where it impacts a lot of people. So the difference here is that burnout can be caused by that chronic stress over time. You know, so a lot of times what happens with burnout is that people don't realize that they're burned out, or once they hit that place of burnout, they know that something's off or that something's wrong, but we're not exactly sure what it is because maybe it is that emotional numbing. Compassion fatigue, on the other hand, can be a lot more sudden, and so it looks like situations where, say, you've had some high-intensity phone calls throughout the day or high-intensity interactions with other people, that all of a sudden you're like, all right, my boundaries are going up, my walls are all up, I'm not feeling any of this, I have nothing left, right? So it can be that really sudden manifestation of it. So we might see that emotional numbness again, but also some reduced empathy, feeling overwhelmed, which is maybe where the anxiety side comes into. And then difficulty disconnecting. So I don't know if you all have had this experience, like when you go through high stress situations for a period of time, but then all of a sudden like you have that initial insomnia, like trouble falling asleep, you're laying in bed, racking your brain, still thinking about it. It's difficult to just turn off and on, right, whenever you want to. But everything starts to kind of meld together. So kind of a parallel there, right? There's a lot of overlap between these two things, but in the United States, we are the country that reports the highest rates of workplace stress, the highest rates of burnout, the highest rates of compassion fatigue. And so these things uniquely impact us. And so that's why I think it's important to address these today, and along with some other things. So one of the things I like to think of here is checking your emotional dashboard, right? I'll kind of roll with the car scenario driving into work, right? But if your check engine light is on, You know, a lot of times it might be like, okay, maybe it's just an O2 sensor or something, no big deal, it's on, but we're not too worried about it, right? Sometimes though, we go get it checked and we realize like, oh, there are 4 or 5 codes going off right now that I didn't even know about. So it's in front of us all the time, but what matters is, do we see it? Do we notice it, right? So there are emotional signs, physical signs, and behavioral signs, and a lot of times we experience a range of these and there's some overlap, but different people are prone to different symptoms more or less. So some of those emotional signs, it can look like the irritability, sometimes the hopelessness, right? Like, I'm never gonna get out of this, right? The detachment or the anxiety, but we also a lot of times will have those physiological symptoms. People start reporting headaches a lot, like the Sunday scaries, right? It's like the day before the work week starts and you're like, oh, already thinking about it. And the behavioral signs, we might withdraw. So even the things that would be helpful supports when we're burned out or experience that compassion fatigue, a lot of times we pull back from the things that actually would help us too, which can amplify symptoms. And this is where being really self-aware is helpful. So just kind of thinking through, doing those check-ins with yourself throughout the day or even weekly check-ins with yourself, but what drains my energy? What restores my energy? What warning signs am I prone to? And what do I start to neglect when I start experiencing that stress, that burnout, that compassion fatigue? Did anyone have any thoughts here on that first question on what drains your energy? This is totally subjective too. There's no right or wrong answer. Rude people, yes, that can be a big factor, right? Like you're moving about your day, you answer the phone call and immediately you're like, you gotta pull the phone away from your face a little bit. You know, very quickly saps your energy. What else?
Well, you know, in relation to my job, when you look at a case and you see one mistake after another.
Okay.
You're just, at that point, you're so overwhelmed of how far back do you go?
Yeah.
And you know, touch you feel that you can't tell people they make a mistake because you're probably so nice to everybody.
Yeah.
And then you're just, you know.
Yeah, I do think that it can be a challenge sometimes, right? When you have to think through intent and impact, right? So it's like, I need to convey this message, but I also need to factor in how this is going to land or be received by somebody else. And do I have that individual relationship with that person where we can navigate this pretty quickly, or is there going to be a lot of tension when this comes out?
You're dealing with people you don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so what restores your energy? What helps you all feel better when you're depleted? What do we know? Yeah, okay. So this is actually a uniquely, I like this response because this is something that comes up for me a lot too. And like I might talk for like 10 hours straight throughout my day. So I've gotten really good at just being able to yap. But I don't always feel like that. So sometimes what I have to do outside of work is go to a coffee shop and be around people, but in a setting where I don't have an expectation to actually talk or be social. So just like being in the presence of people where I don't have that expectation helps. Yeah, so that can be one. What else? Music. Yeah, why do you say music?
I don't know, something about it. I just get in my head and jam into my thing and
Okay.
bring me back.
So I like to use in individual therapy sessions this acronym. It's called DOSE, but it stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And they're the 4 neurochemicals and hormones that make up the basis for positive emotion. And we get dopamine when we set goals, when we accomplish tasks, when we finish projects, right? So it's the thing that drives us forward. Oxytocin, we call like the connection hormone, and that is when we notice positive qualities about other people, when we spend time with loved ones, petting animals can do that, warm showers can mimic that effect. And then serotonin. Serotonin is a mood stabilizer, and we get that from time outside, mindfulness activities, meditation, and we have endorphins. And we get endorphins, which are our body's natural painkillers, when we laugh with people, when we listen to music, when we watch movies. And so what I recommend to people a lot of times is, it's hard to fit all of these things in all the time, but if you can pull one thing from each of those categories each day, it's a really good buffer against compassion fatigue, against burnout. And they're also things that are in our control. Because it seems like a lot of our jobs, we work with other people, and one of the things that's always outside of our control?
Other
other people, right? No matter what I do, someone else can still choose whatever reaction they're going to have, right? But what is in my control are doing those small daily things to kind of recalibrate myself so that when I enter those spaces, I'm showing up in a way where I'm like, okay, I feel comfortable with this. So what are the warning signs? How do we know when, and we talked about this a little bit on the last one, but anyone have any thoughts here? Like what tells you that you're starting to get to that point where we're fatigued, we're overwhelmed, we're drained, we need a break? Yeah?
I think when, being Taylor, when it gets too intense, what we laugh at a lot of the times together, all of a sudden, it just rubs you the wrong way. No reason why, but you're just dealing with other stuff. And one day, you know, it's not, hey dude, how are you? Hey Smiley, how are you? It's, you forget about those two things, and it's like, yeah, what's up with them?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I know.
We talk about this internally. We talk about this internally at our office a lot because a lot of the therapists, like between sessions, will leave our doors open. So if another therapist walks by, we might strike up a conversation, check in on each other. And so yeah, sometimes I'm doing a note, I have my door open, a therapist walks by. I know who it is because I know their schedule. And they don't stop and say hi. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like, are we, you know? And then I have to catch myself sometimes and be like, okay, could be a whole host of other things. And so we check in with each other on that front. But I noticed that too. So we call it emotional reasoning, right? And so as logical and analytical as we all like to think that we are, our logic is oftentimes informed by whatever we're feeling. So if I'm frustrated, my thoughts are going to be an extrapolation of that frustration. If I'm sad, again, same thing. If I'm happy, same thing. And so when compassion fatigue or burnout shows up, a lot of times it is that irritability. So I'll start noticing, yeah, like little things, like somebody didn't take the trash out in the office last night, right? And they left a banana peel in there, and now the whole place smells like bananas. And I'm like heated about it. It's not a big deal, but in my head, in that moment, it is, right? So the last one here, what am I neglecting when I'm stressed? So what starts to fall by the wayside as we become stressed out? Yeah, that's a really good one, right? Our relationship with ourselves is the most important one. Not at the expense of other people, but if we don't feel comfortable with where we're at, we might start neglecting ourselves, stop taking care of ourselves in the way that we would have. Yeah. Were you going to say something too?
Oh, you kind of encompassed that. I was going to say sleeping, eating.
Yeah, sleeping, eating, a lot of initial insomnia, trouble falling asleep. I might work through lunch, right? Because I have deadlines and things to do, so I'll skip lunch today. And then I crash at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon in my last session. Usually I have to tell them I'm like feeling a little bit out of it, right? So that's where that self-awareness really comes into play, because a lot of times people don't realize that they're burned out or that they're experiencing these different symptoms until we're already in the midst of it. And part of it is the stress response. And I always like to focus on this because I think that we mischaracterize stress in a lot of ways. When we talk very colloquially or casually with other people. So stress, the base definition of a stressor or stress is just anything that causes us to have to adapt or change. So stress in and of itself is not good or bad, but the accumulation of stressors, right? So if you have a lot of major life changes going on at once, so it might look like, hey, just moved to a new town, started a new job, distance from family and friends and all, right? It can be a whole host of things, or maybe I just went through something pretty difficult in life. But also the way that I interpret those stressors, right? So they did a study where they had two groups of people, and one group read an excerpt that talked about how stress is empowering and motivating. It helps us overcome challenges, shapes our personality. The second group read an excerpt that talked about how stress is overwhelming, debilitating. It stops us from being able to pursue our dreams and our passions and hobbies and all of that. And then they had these two groups rate their levels of stress and how they subjectively identified they were doing in terms of their mental health. Which group do you think did better? The first one, right? That was just primed with information that stress is a positive thing. So the way that we subjectively relate to stressful experiences has a direct impact on the way that it impacts us physiologically, how it impacts our relationships. And so when we become stressed, it's our brain's primary function to ensure our survival. So naturally, our brain will always try to notice the things that could go wrong before it will notice the things that could go right. And it's a really adaptive feature of our brains because we want to problem solve things that we're going through so that they don't happen again, right? But at the same time, when we're in that chronic stress state, when cortisol and adrenaline are high, maybe it's from workplace stressors outside of the workplace, and we get into that chronic state, that negative emotion can kind of override our problem-solving capabilities. And one of the things that comes up most often is we start to switch the things that are in our control and are out of our control, right? So I might forget that what's in my control is whether I go to bed at 10 o'clock tonight, but what I think is in my control is getting this other person to respond to me in a different way that would be more helpful for me, right? So, like I talked about, it's not always bad, but when we start talking chronic stress and that rise in adrenaline and cortisol, it does have a pretty direct impact on our mental health functioning. So then we have the window of tolerance, right? Is anyone familiar with this? It's something I talk about a lot in sessions that I like. Interesting, I'm not a huge fan of this in total, I'll tell you guys why. So when we're in our window of tolerance, really what this means, it's built by biological factors, by how our parents modeled those, the way that we relate to stress. But if I'm in my window of tolerance, what that means is I'm in a space where my stress is not overwhelming me or exceeding my capabilities at a given moment, right? So like I'm feeling pretty good if I'm in my window of tolerance. When people become too stressed out, what happens is they tend to fall into either hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And the hyperarousal side, people usually catch on to pretty quickly if you give an example of this. So sometimes when people are too stressed out, they start experiencing the racing thoughts, the trouble slowing down, the irritability, difficulty sleeping at night, right? So a lot of times when people are really stressed out and they're in that hyperarousal state, they're the ones that are on the phones that are yelling at us. Right? They're stressed out, they're in the hyperarousal. For some people though, it looks more like hypoarousal. So when people get too overwhelmed, they start to shut down, right? So I'll start sleeping more, maybe start being late to work, feeling more lethargic, changes to sleep and appetite are a really common feature of that, but kind of that depressed mood, right? We go into that low energy state. The part that I don't like about this is that when I talk with clients about this, and they've really changed my mind on this, is that a lot of them will say, I'm in both of those pretty frequently, or I oscillate between those two states. So a lot of times people have a primary, but both of them can impact us depending on what the stressors are. So what do you all think? And whenever I ask these questions, sometimes you just have to kind of remind myself of this, that it's not a session. So don't ever feel like you have to disclose something that you're not comfortable disclosing. But does any of this stand out to you all? You notice like things that make you feel like you go in that high stress state?
Well, I think I kind of agree with the person that are both, their extremes to me, those either hyper or high.
Yeah.
I think you're once you run out of energy and you go the opposite, just as bad, except you're a lazy person instead of like screaming at somebody when you're done screaming, that person gonna go and do nothing.
Oh yeah, screaming is exhausting too. All right, we're completely depleted afterwards. What I notice about me is if I'm really stressed out, I'm in the hypoarousal at work and in the hyperarousal outside of work, which is the opposite of what I had thought about until I really started digging into this. And so, kind of a continuation here, but yeah, what happens when we try to have conversations with people when they're in one of those two states? We don't get very far, right? Because either we're talking and they're not giving us anything, or we're not getting a chance to talk, right? So these are some of the questions that I use in sessions. We actually call it the 2-question stress test. I expand on it a little bit because I think it addresses some other features that I like to cover. But the first thing is, because this helps us identify what's in our control and what's out of our control, is what specifically am I stressing about? And it kind of goes back to that if I can label it, I can own it, right? So the more that I know what the thing is that's impacting me, the better I can start to figure out what I can do about it. So what specifically am I stressing about? And so a lot of times I'll have people write down like just the 2 or 3, right? List out the 2 or 3 things that are stressing you out the most in as most concrete terms as possible. Then I might ask, is this in my control or out of my control? And so you can break those apart. And a lot of times there's overlap, right? If like finances are stressing me out, well, what's in my control is whether I swipe my card, but what's out of my control might be if I blow a tire when I leave here today, right? So we have to kind of parse those apart to try to see what can I actually do here, and what is the stress signaling to me? Because a lot of times, what we stress about is what we care about. If I don't care about something, I'm not going to stress about it. So our stressors also tell us a little bit about ourselves and what we value as people, right? Like I value the care that I give to my clients. So if I feel like I'm ineffective as a therapist during a session, I might start getting really tough on myself, and it might have nothing to do with me. What can I learn from this opportunity? Which is this an area of growth, right? Is this something that, you know, if I revisit those values, if I lean into, is there some valuable information that can come out of this? And how would I know if this was resolved? Because a lot of times what keeps us in those chronic stress states is we're still stressing about things that aren't even happening anymore, right? Maybe we've resolved them, they're old news, but we're still thinking about it all the time. It takes up a lot of our bandwidth. So how would I know if this was resolved? And a lot of times too, when we talk mental health, we always focus on symptoms and diagnoses, right? Like what's wrong, what's the presenting problem. But something that we don't talk about enough is what does it look like when I am doing well or when things are going okay? Because if we only focus on the problems, we never really find the solution. And some of the things that stand out to me here are emotion regulation, right? So if I'm in that window of tolerance, I can be more mindful. I can be more curious when people come to me with problems. If I'm really stressed out and somebody comes to me with a problem, I'm probably going to get defensive or be more reactive than I would have otherwise been. So how regulated am I? Psychological flexibility. And this is how do we adjust or adapt to stress and change. So let's say, we use the term like cognitive reappraisal. Let's say I have a plan for the day. My plan is I'm going to do A, B, C. Well, I get A done, and on my way to B, all of a sudden something happens and I can't do it. Our brain has this tendency to go like, great, my whole plan is shot, don't get to do the thing that I wanted to do, and so then we just kind of collapse on that plan. And so psychological flexibility looks a lot like, how can I create a new plan that incorporates that unexpected change so that this can still go well, right? So it's not giving up on the plan, it's creating something new. And the difficult part about that is that for our brain to be able to access that creative space, it mutually competes with anxiety centers. So the more we lean into creativity and our problem solving, the more we lean away from that anxiety and that stress. But then we have connection, right? Which is our ability to develop and maintain positive social relationships. And I notice this for myself at least, right? If I'm really overwhelmed and stressed out for periods of time, one of the things that goes is, I can't do anything Tuesday night, can't do anything Wednesday night, right? I have all these other things to do and my priorities will start to stack on top of everything else. Purpose and meaning, and this is the area where I'm going to focus the most on today, but having values and goals that guide behavior, as well as healthy coping skills and ways of responding. So one of the things I always try to ask myself, whenever I'm stressed out, whatever that automatic thought is, that natural tendency, like, okay, I'm stressed, here's what I'm gonna do about it. I try to check myself, like, is this something that's healthy for me or not? Because a lot of times it's like going on autopilot, right? If we're watching a movie and we have a bag of chips on the table, we're gonna eat a lot more chips than if we had eaten them in the kitchen, right? Because we're completely focused on something else, so we're just passively, right? And same thing with stress. If we don't notice how we're responding to stress, we become passive observers of our behaviors. And one thing to also keep in mind is that boundaries are super essential, right? Whenever we talk about mental health and wellness, it's very difficult to pour into somebody else's cup if ours is empty. So boundaries are not barriers, but a lot of times boundaries are effective ways to preserve our mental space, our bandwidth. So for you all, in your roles, what might some of those barriers be? How do you protect yourself against being depleted in the first place? What kind of boundaries do you have? You have thoughts here? Maybe you don't have them too, right? I was for 9 years now, and I'd say like the first 5 years that I had not a single boundary. If anyone needed anything, I was like, I got it, right? You shut your door? Okay, yeah. You start knocking, like, are you in there? Right? Yeah. What else? What's that? What is that? Yeah, yeah. one thing that I really like on that front is creating some kind of ritual that marks your leave from work. A lot of times people think, well, I technically I walked out of the office, right? I'm in my car, I'm going home, but we're still thinking about it. So whether it's before you leave the office, having some kind of small practice that you do, or right when you get home, some kind of practice that you do that's kind of that energy refresher, that reset that gets your headspace in a, okay, I'm not in work anymore, I'm in home life. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Yep. I see that whenever I do my last note at the end of each day, we use therapy notes for our electronic medical records, and as soon as I like close my laptop, I'm like, I'm done, that's it. That's it for today. Yep. It's a good one. Any other boundaries? Mm-hmm. So protecting your personal time, right? I always think about this where, like, I don't know if some of you were like in manager roles where you're like have the on-call phone attached to your hip all the time or anything. Like, I don't know how people do it. Couldn't be me. If I'm getting calls at like 7, 8 o'clock at night, Saturday afternoons, like I would fall apart. Couldn't do it. So I'm like, hey, this is my schedule week to week, and this is what in these hours, I'll do just about anything that I need to do, but outside of those hours, I'm done. All right. So one of the things, though, is we talked about how stress means that we care about things too, right? We don't stress about the things that we don't care about. And a lot of times those go back to our values and why we do what we do in the first place. So think about your best day at work that you've ever had. What was it about that day that made it a good day? These might be hard to find too. For some people, I'm like, I can think of jobs that I've had in the past where I'm like, I wanted to leave the whole time.
I think the best days at work for me are the ones where the phone doesn't ring very much and people don't come into the office very much and you can sit there and do your paperwork and work in, I'm a court clerk, I don't work for the family support division, but so we do civil stuff and child support and probate and everything, but it's nice to just not have all that outside. I don't know what you want to call it, but just to be able to do your work.
Yeah. I was thinking it was like being able to be single-minded, right? It's like if I'm getting calls and being pulled in all these different directions, I have to think about 20 things at once. And one thing about our brain is that our brain isn't temporally located, which really just means that what we think about, our brain thinks is happening in that moment. So if you're thinking about 20 things at once, and a lot of us have to do that in the course of our day, our brain thinks that we're doing all those things at once, even though we're only one person and we can only do one thing and be in one place at one time. So when we have those minutes to decompress, we're able to be single-minded, right? It's like, okay, I can finally just focus on this one task that I've been wanting to get done. Anyone else? Yeah?
My best day at work, years ago, there was a child that somehow was in a group home, and I was trying to find out what the child was for purposes of enforcing the case.
Mm-hmm.
And got a hold of his worker, his social worker. Anyway, it all came out to find that this child was placed in a group setting because both of his biological parents went to jail.
Okay.
In actuality, the system didn't know that his father was really somebody else, and it's really complicated.
Sure, yeah. As these kids often do, right? Yeah.
You had a children's division, I'll call it worker, and I talked, and they found out that, oh wow, here's a child that nobody wanted. Now we kind of know because the father wasn't really his father, and through it all, we talked later, this person and I, and this boy met his real biological father who had a court order for.
Yeah.
And she said that he looked at, he was a 6'2" kid, looked at his father who was 6'4", and said, that's my dad. So,
Yeah.
and it has nothing to do with collecting money, it's.
Yeah, I think, that's right on track though, right? It's like the things that tell us why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's like when you finally get that one kind of breakthrough situation, or when something goes right and you help a kid reconnect with their biological parent, right? All of that stuff is so meaningful because I don't know who's ever had this, like, the thought, like, I don't get paid enough to do this, right? But we keep doing it, right? We keep doing the job anyways, so what makes it worth it, right? And a lot of times it's that. It's like we get to help people. We get to see people get better. We get to help people solve problems that otherwise may have hit a lot of roadblocks. So the connection, impact, and growth are just kind of examples that I'd put on there, but it looks different for different people. So we do need more than just a paycheck. And it's funny, even me and my close friends, we go back and forth on this sometimes, because like I have some friends in sales or whatever, and sometimes I'm like, I should have got into sales. And they're like, no. They're like, I go to work every day, right? And like, I'm just showing up doing like door-to-door sales, whatever the case is. And they're like, I find no meaning in what I do at all. And like me on that side, I'm like, I do leave work feeling like, okay, I made an impact today. And that's more important to me. So, while what we do matters, and obviously we have to pay bills and all that, what we do has an impact on our mental health. And so when people are in a good spot with their mental health, they tend to report, right, and this naturally kind of makes sense, greater job satisfaction, higher motivation, more emotional well-being, and increased resilience, right? So I can handle one stressor pretty well. If it's 10 at once, all of those 10 are going to be a little bit shaky. So your purpose is your why. It's not a position, but it's a perspective. And sometimes we lose sight of that through the course of our day, right? We got 100 different things going on. We're like, okay, I have to get A done, and then I have to get B done, and then I have to get C done. But if we take a moment to back up, zoom out a little bit, and say, why am I doing what I'm doing? If we can reconnect with that purpose, then it shifts our relationship with stress, right? Because what we stress about is what we care about. And so for you all, what does that purpose look like? You know, you mentioned a really good example of helping a kid reconnect with their biological father, but what are the things that tell you all what you do is worthwhile? What makes it worth it? Yeah.
Sometimes some people come in and they're a wreck and they get there after talking to them and giving them what they need, or at least listening to them. Sometimes they just want somebody to hear what they have to say. Give them that opportunity, and they're like, they walk out a different person because they're like, so good just to get that off their chest.
Yeah.
So that to me is a really good thing.
Yeah. I like that example, because I have this tendency to fall into like fix-it mode, right? If somebody comes to me with a problem, I'm like, all right, let's figure this out. But a lot of times people don't even need that. You're like, wow, I'm actually doing more work when less would have been more helpful if I had just listened and just heard what you had to say. So I hear that sometimes, right? It's like, I've talked to 5 people and nobody's been willing to listen to me until now. And just having that space means a lot sometimes. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah?
Well, I am one of those manager people, but and so I feel the purpose most when like, everybody in this room is a public servant, who's getting rich doing what we're doing. We're all doing it ideally to benefit the public. I've got a tremendous team, and when they get celebrated for their efforts, when they get, whether it be, so many years of service, or they get recognized someplace for their outstanding efforts, that makes me feel the why.
Yeah.
I know what a great team it is, but when other folks see it as well, and they get lifted up and recognized.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of those things, it's like, a lot of times we listen least to the people we're closest to, so it's like, if it's, one of our family members or our kids or even the people that, we manage, we can give them all the praise, but because we're so close to them, like, yeah, you're supposed to say that though, right? And so then when they get it from somewhere else, you're like, see, I told you so, right? Like, you've been doing a good job this whole time. Yeah. Yep. I talked about that. A couple of these I might skip over a little bit. So what disconnects people from their meeting? And we talked about, those task after task after task, how that can show up. But like you just mentioned there, sometimes people don't feel recognized, right? So you're an outlet for them. No matter how hard I try, if I never get any kind of feedback, over time that's depleting, right? It's like I don't feel heard or understood or valued. And so just those little acknowledgments go a long way for people. It's like, hey, I noticed this good thing that you did today and just wanted to point it out to you. Constant crisis mode. right? If it's like you're putting out fires all day, every day, we go into that survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, we don't feel that psychological safety, then it's really hard to connect with those things. Like, how do I transcend this? Or how do I turn this into something positive? It's like, I'm just trying to make it right now. Lack of autonomy. So feeling powerless, right? If the majority of my day feels out of my control, a lot of times. Administrative overload can do that too. Task after task after task, without reconnecting with why am I doing this? And that emotional exhaustion, right? Which a lot of times ties back to the boundaries. When do I turn this stuff off so that I can do the things that are meaningful to me? So, and we've talked about like your best days and that sort of thing, but why did you all choose to do what you chose to do? To help people. I think we're all in agreement on that part, right? But why the role that you picked specifically? What led you that direction? Why was that your calling, or at least your current calling? We have a thing at work where it's like, we may be with you forever, or it may just be a season, but we hope it's the best season if that's the case too. So where you're at right now, why was it your calling?
Well, I retired from my first career, and I was looking for a part-time job, and there it was.
Okay, yeah. They say that a lot of times we make big decisions based on just 2 or 3 bits of information, right? So it's like, needed something to do, and you're like, hey, this sounds pretty good, right?
I've been there 7 years, so.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. What else? Yeah?
For me, it was a couple things, but comfort, I knew what I was walking into as far as, being an attorney, I knew what legal foot I was going into, so I was like, okay, I know something about this versus the type of legal foot I had no idea about. But then also kind of the idea of like, opportunity to grow, so comfort and the ability to still grow at the same time, which is important, I feel like, at least for me. Sometimes if I walk in a situation that I have no idea what's going on, what I'm getting myself into, it's a little scary, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that was the main.
I feel like uncertainty is always anxiety-inducing, right? You're like, you never know what's going to happen. So it sounds like you had a good like home base to build from, right? You're like, this is a comfort for me, and I can build from here. And who benefits, right? For me, hopefully the clients that I work with, but what about for you all? People that you help and serve? The children, yeah. So it's a good day when kids come in, like confide in you and things, and just, it's like their one spot where they can just be themselves, or, yeah. What positive impact have you made recently? And again, so the reason why I bring up some of these questions, like I talked about earlier, our brain has more gray matter devoted to, sometimes they call it negative emotion. It's not necessarily that, but it's to protection, right? To problem solve so that stress doesn't happen again. So a lot of times people think like, oh, I just wish like I was as happy as that person or X, Y, Z, but we forget that it's pretty rare that I think people are super happy on accident, right? It's a very intentional practice of like re-engineering those thoughts all the time and trying to focus on those things. So what positive impacts have you all made recently? What was that?
Where they can help themselves, talking through the situation where they're willing to work it out within themselves.
Yeah, okay, yeah. When you see someone that like develop that agency in that moment, that's like, okay, actually, like I can leave this to you, right? You've got it. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
I would say getting a call from someone who is much less than happy and getting them to calm down and listen to reason and let them know that you're actually trying to help them and successfully help them and 3 or 4 other calls before them and you're able to do that.
I can kind of tell that in your voice even, right? So it's de-escalation skills. They say if you're working with somebody who's like high intensity, like the more calm you are and softer you speak, the more it brings them back to a good baseline. And it seems like you'd be really good at that. You're like, well, stay calm and yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, well, oh, like, I'm heated, right? And you're like, this person's keeping it calm, yeah. And what values does your work allow you to express? Do you guys ever like talk about that? And you're like, if you have like team huddles and stuff where you go back to your mission statements and the things that built the organizations in the first place, and that stuff stand out?
Team meetings are mostly about meeting the numbers. What we need to do to get those numbers.
Okay, so you're going back to those like mission statements and the, what do they call it? They have the mission statement and the little group where they do all the values when they set up the paperwork to start. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, something like that. So what keeps you all going? Why do you keep showing up? Yeah. So you're necessary, right? The things you do, nobody else could do. Maybe nobody else wants to do sometimes, right? But you're like, I got this. Yeah, okay. Anything else? Yeah. I mean, it's internal too, right? So you're like, I'm someone who wants to be this kind of person. Yeah. So this is where I kind of shift gears into resilience a little bit. I think in my day-to-day, because I focus so much on symptoms and diagnosing and treating, that a lot of times when people all of a sudden have that respite or they're doing a little bit better, they come in, they're like, I don't even know what to talk about today. And then they're like worried, like trying to come up with stuff and like telling me like, well, this thing was kind of stressful last week. And I'm like, hey, we don't have to go there, right? If things are going well, don't rock the boat, just find something you're stressed about. It's okay to be doing okay too. So I usually think of emotional awareness, right? Can I label, identify, acknowledge, accept how I'm feeling in any given moment? Can I adapt to things that are going on, even when things are going well? Can I sit back and just enjoy that while they're going well? Do I have those support systems? And really, for a lot of people, it's just one or two people, one or two close people that you can rely on and trust. How do I cope? And you all kind of mentioned this over here a little bit, the self-compassion side, but like my relationship with myself. How's my internal dialogue? Am I talking to myself as though I am someone that I care about? Or am I like my worst critic? Okay? And then meaning and purpose, those values that guide why I choose to do what I do. So, a lot of times we think, you ever see those people where it's like they're always on top of it. You're like, how do they just move about life? Like everything is so easy, right? They show up, they're in a good mood every day, tasks are always done, clocked out on time. We think that some people are just wired that way, but that's usually a misconception, right? We might all present as though we're doing really well, but it doesn't mean that people who are resilient don't also face stressors and challenges and struggles. What it means is that maybe they have a different kind of support, or maybe they have a different relationship with that stress in that moment. So we can learn a lot from each other by asking those questions. Because the reality is that everyone has limits, everyone needs resources, and that when we have good boundaries, when we have good support systems, we can grow a lot faster. Let's get through a few of those. So, and this kind of starts tying into a little bit more as far as the workplace culture that I want to focus on, but relationships buffer us from stress, especially when it's workplace stress, right? Like, do you all have like a work mom or a work dad or that kind of thing? Or like the person that you walk into in the office every morning and right when you walk in, maybe they brought you your coffee that day, or you know who I'm talking about? Everyone have a person in mind? Yeah. It's like a person to vent to, right? It's like, even though you might not be able to help me with anything throughout the course of my day, like as far as my work tasks and responsibilities, the fact that we can just vent to each other for a couple minutes like goes such a long ways. Just being able to connect with somebody on that front. And building perspective. Sometimes it's we can think this through together. And I've noticed this, I won't get into the details of the previous job, but I remember having a job in the past where it's like there wasn't that psychological safety. I couldn't ask questions because I was like, well, if I ask a question, they're going to treat me as though I'm not competent. Or if I ask a question, I must not know what I'm doing. Or, right, all of that stuff starts to come up. Or maybe I do know what I'm doing, but they're still checking, right? They're still making sure, So Reduced isolation. I don't have to carry this alone, right? Even just knowing that somebody else, and that's what we say is the difference between like sympathy and empathy, right? Somebody says that they're going through something and you're like, well, you think you have it bad. I have this going on. That's really a sympathy response, right? But an empathy response is, I'm willing to sit through this with you. I might not be able to help you out of the mud right now, but I can come down and sit in the mud with you until you get out. And improved problem solving. Sometimes, like we talked about earlier, when we're really stressed out, our brain's ability to problem solve shuts down. So as we become stressed out, our amygdala, which is our fight or flight center, starts to kick on. As that happens, our prefrontal cortex starts to deactivate. And our prefrontal cortex is what's responsible for problem solving, for executive functioning skills, and a lot of times for the expression of our personality, right? So when we're in fight or flight mode, or when we're in survival mode, all that stuff starts to go away. And so just having someone to be like, hey, like, usually I could probably handle this, but right now I'm having a brain block. Can you help me fix this or problem solve this with me? Because relationships are regulating. So what we notice is that when we are around a supportive person, the physiological stress sign starts to decrease. So your heart rate will start to decrease, that brain fog goes away a little bit, we realize we can think more clearly, maybe we joke a little bit easier, and we can figure things out a lot faster. So I know I had you all kind of thought experiment this internally, so just something to consider here, but who are your people? And it might not just be work people either, but the one or two people that are closest to you, and usually I frame this as like, who is the person that you could talk to about something that was going on, that you would actually talk to, and who would actually be there for you if you needed something. Because a lot of times, this happens a lot when I work with kids, where I'm like, do you have somebody you can talk to? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I've got like 5 friends. And I'm like, would you talk to them? And they're like, no, not at all. Right? So I'm like, so it's a little bit different, right? You have to be willing to be vulnerable a little bit to let people in. So these are some of those fundamental questions I think of when I think of workplace culture and the values that hopefully exist everywhere, but can also be a work in progress. So the first one is trust, right? I can be honest in the workplace. I can tell people what's really going on without fear of retaliation, without retribution, all of that. Psychological safety. I can ask questions and grow and learn, and I'm in a space that's supportive or conducive to that. I have that support, right? So someone has my back. I'm not doing this alone. Belonging. I matter here. The roles, the hats that I wear, they mean something to more than just me, but even if it's just me, that's great too. And collaboration, we work as a team, right? We're all in this together. So small actions create strong connections. And you mentioned a lot about this earlier too. So those check-ins, or even you two, right? Just those small little interactions, like, how are you doing today? And I have a bad tendency about this, even myself. I try to leave my door open more than I used to. But between sessions, I would always close my door because I was like, I have notes to do, I've got all this documentation, I gotta get this done so that when I leave at 5 or 6, that I can close my laptop and all that. But what I found is that then work does start to feel more depleting. And so I leave my door open more now, right? Because like that small interaction, that might be the only person I talk to outside of a session over the course of like 10 hours. So those small check-ins, listening actively. So do I listen to respond, or am I listening to hear, and in a way that makes the other person feel heard and understood? Do I show appreciation, recognizing those small efforts, right? No matter how small, right? It can be something like, hey, I noticed that you came in with a smile this morning. No matter how small, right? Just to acknowledge and notice it. And that's actually a skill for positive mindfulness, is noticing positive qualities about other people. Offer support, how can I help? Right, if maybe one day my bandwidth, like I've got nothing left, right? This is all I've got for today. But the next day, maybe I've got some more flexibility. So how can I then help somebody else out, take something off their plate, build that connection, and then celebrate those successes, whether they're large or they're small. And what leaders can do to help in teams is to celebrate the impact, right? Is, hey, I noticed that you did hit those numbers, right? Or that quota this month, or I don't know how you all do, like quarterly or monthly, probably depends on the role. and connect those tasks back to that overall mission, right? So you hit the numbers, but what does that say about the larger context of the organizational structure, the culture? How does that impact us as a whole? Recognizing those contributions, so effort, not just outcomes as well, right? Like I noticed that, so you think about it with like kids' sports. I go back to this one a lot. Where a kid, say, is in football and their team loses, right? A lot of kids, they break down, right? It's like, we just didn't win. And so acknowledging the effort too, that life isn't just about the outcome, but it's about the effort. It's, did you try your best? Did you come out here with a good attitude and a good spirit and all of that? Like, that's the stuff that matters. The outcomes, that's gonna happen. The more that you do it, the better you get. That's gonna come over the course of time. So encouraging that growth and then fostering connection. And I like to use this in session as just kind of a way for building resilience, but focusing on recognize, regulate, reframe, respond, and recover. So what am I feeling right now? And you can do that in any given moment, as kind of a check-in. Regulate, which is how can I calm my nervous system? Maybe I am calm in that moment, so I'm like, okay, I'm good. Let's say I am stressed, then okay, what do I need in this moment? What's one small thing that can help me out right now to make it through the next moment, the next hour, the next day? Reframe, what else could be true? Because a lot of times, the stuff that we think about, because our emotion guides our logic, we try to find two alternatives to whatever our perspective is. So I might be convinced that somebody's trying to upset me, and a very hand-in-hand thing with frustration and anger is that it also convinces us that we're right too. Well, I'm angry, so somebody must have done something wrong. So trying to identify two alternatives. What else could be going on that maybe I'm not considering? Respond. What actions align with my values? So how can I approach this in a way that isn't just how I'm feeling in this moment, but that is a reflection of who I want to be and how I want to show up in any given space? And recover, what helps me restore? So after I go through this, what do I need that's going to help me get back to a good baseline? Yeah, we'll kind of cover over that one now. So we've talked about this. So a resilient mindset, like I said, people a lot of times aren't just naturally just happy and doing great all the time, but they get really good at this, which is that reframe. Instead of I have to fix everything, it's I can contribute to positive change. Maybe I can't fix all of this, but I can do something, right, that's going to have a direct impact or a positive impact. Or instead of this person is difficult, it's maybe this person is really struggling and I can show up in a different way. Or I can't handle this, well, maybe I need support skills or recovery. Maybe I haven't slept well in the past 3 days and I'm going to be stressed, anxious, and depressed because that's how people work when they don't sleep, right? So to kind of recap all of that, or to integrate in the best way that I could try to put all this together, is these 5 things, which is understanding the impact that stress has on behavior, recognizing emotions before responding, right? So thinking about maybe how I'm feeling and also how that other person might be feeling so that I can guide my intent and my impact. Prioritizing connection is how I choose to, whatever I choose to say or do, is this going to build something meaningful or take away from something meaningful? Am I using healthy coping strategies and am I acting from my values? All right, any questions or anything? Got really quiet at the end here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Gage a round of applause.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, so we are all done, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys have any questions, any feedback or anything, please do let me know. I'll be up here for a little bit. You guys are kind of getting out of here, but thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, here, I'll let you. I was going to exit out like I'm on my laptop. Thank you all for having me today.
So you have more presentations tomorrow, I hear.